We've all been in presentations or delivered presentations where the audience doesn't seem to really connect with the point of what the speaker's trying to communicate. We feel that it was a waste of time, or it just didn't seem to connect with us. We didn't understand why we were there. We walked out of there, maybe even saying the speaker was great, that was a lot of fun, but it didn't have an impact. So if you're in that position, you're trying to communicate something to your team, ask yourself the question, well, what's the point? And today's guest, Joel Schwartzberg, has written two books, one called The Language of Leadership and another called Get to the Point. And what he's sharing today is how to craft your presentations, how to craft your communications with the right focus, the right point, so that then you can reverse engineer back how to put the examples and the vehicles of choice to communicate your point. But without that point, you're not really going to inspire your team to move forward. So Joel has some great tactical tips. It was a great conversation. It inspired me as well. So I can't wait. So let's dive into today's episode of You're in Charge, Now What? With author and presentation expert, Joel Schwartzberg. Okay, Joel, so I'm really excited to talk to you because when I was doing my research, I love the two titles of your books, Language of Leadership and Get to the Point. And so for a lot of the audience, communication skills seem to be this nebulous thing. A lot of people believe either you're a good communicator or you're not. It's not something you can learn. So when someone says that to you, can you really learn better communication skills? What's your response?
My response is simple. Presentation skills, as by definition, are skills and not talents. Nobody is born a professional presenter or an effective presenter. So whether you are a leader or an aspiring leader, the first thing you should know is that you can develop those skills no matter where you are on the spectrum. Mm-hmm. In fact, I've coached some coordinators, even some interns, so that they present very effectively. And I've seen CEOs who have a lot of experience, even giving keynotes, giving speeches, and they ramble. And there's epic fail because they don't realize some of the key things. And it's not about, what the shirt you choose to wear or how white your teeth are or what your title is. It all comes down to one big idea, which you were getting at with the books, which is, what is the point you're trying to make? And are you making it effectively? And that's the ball game. But too few people realize that. And so that's the skill and the key to moving from the presenter that you think you are to the presenter that you most want to be.
So on that then, getting to the point, I had a boss at one time who used to always say when we were debating decisions or thinking about things, he said, what's point B? Meaning we have to get to a destination for us to make that decision. So when you say there's someone giving a keynote or a presentation or even just running a meeting, is it as simple as what you're saying? Like what's the point of this meeting? And that needs to be documented?
Yeah, it needs to be understood, not only by the person leading a meeting or speaking, but also the people who are supporting that speaker. And when it comes to understanding what it means to have a point, the best starting point is knowing what's not a point, what people confuse points with. And these include themes, topics, categories, catchphrases. For example, if I was talking to you, Glenn, and I asked for your point, you said, well, I'm going to talk today about podcasting. You would not be sharing with me your point because you're not saying, what is the intelligence or the proposition you're trying to make? Even if you said, all right, the value of podcasting or the evolution of podcasting, you're not telling me the thing you want me to extract. You're giving me another theme, another session title. You're not telling me, or let's say someone generically who works on podcasts for a corporation, they're not making a point until they say something like, I believe that podcasting is the best avenue through which we're going to reach our millennial audience. Now, whether that's true or not, it sort of makes you stand up and say, oh, go on.
Right.
I'd like to hear more about that. Give me evidence, give me storytelling, give me rationality, give me data that supports that proposition. So it's not just you sharing a general idea, even if it's leadership or entrepreneurship or podcasting or social media. None of these are points. They're all themes and topics.
And you're
so you need to understand,
in that case, you're leaving it up to the audience to try to figure out where we're going with this instead of you leading them down the path of and I like your example. I believe podcasting is the best way that we're going to reach our millennial audience. That's pretty clear. We understand that. And then we can, as you said, debate it, support it, discuss it, versus you could even say, what's the best way to reach our audience of millennials? That's still a little bit broader, but then you would probably break it down and say, what do you think our best way is? Knowing our company, we have video, we have podcasting, we have this. Right. What do you, that's at least getting down to something, you're painting the picture more clearly in their head to see where we're going.
Yeah. And there are good metaphors for this. One of them is an agenda. We know that every meeting has an agenda, or it should. But the agenda are not the points of that meeting, unless someone really knows what they're doing. They're topics that you're going to hit a checklist one at a time. So what I always say to people who are leading meetings or executives who are attending meetings, come with your points. What do you want to propose? What do you think this particular audience wants and needs to know? And Glenn, you were talking earlier about mistakes that some leaders make when they do their communications. One of the biggest ones, and one of the ones I like to focus on, is a mistake that's made at the very beginning. And it's this: the leader thinks, all right, what do I want to say? What do I need to say? What am I thinking about today that I want to share?
Right.
This is the wrong question, because that leader can do that in a bathroom, in a tunnel. It assumes there's no audience. It's just your brain and what's coming out of your mouth. But at the end of the day, you'll be judged not by what you say, by what is received. Right. It's like, a pitcher. A pitcher is not throwing the baseball into a space. It's throwing it to the catcher. They need to understand what the catcher needs. So moving away from the metaphors, what a communicator and a leader wants to understand is, what does my audience want and need to know? Once you identify that, then you work backwards. And I want to specify the audience and the team wanting to know something is something they're already aware of that they need more elaboration on. What they need to know is something they may not be aware of, that you need to enlighten them so they can get on board to reaching a goal together.
So I like that. So what you're doing, as you said, it's getting out of the self-serving of what do I want to say. It's what does my team need to move forward. Goes back to what we were talking about. Why are we even having this meeting? What are we trying to accomplish so that people can leave here with action items, a viewpoint, or tasks in order to move forward? And then that's going back to being perceptive enough to know what the question that needs to be asked, that we need to debate, discuss, review, that's going to unlock more success.
Right, because the subtitle of The Language of Leadership is how to engage and inspire your team, not how to make them listen to you, not how to even get their attention, though we talk about that a little bit. But what's the ultimate goal? Not that they are present for your communication, but that there's impact. And we throw that word around, impact, like it's the same thing to everybody. Here's how I define impact. Impact is, if you nail it, your communication, if you do it effectively, that audience, that team, those employees, they will think anew or take a new action as a result of the conveyance of that point. So that's what leaders need to identify. And they want to engage and inspire their team so that we can all work together in service of a goal, not just have them, in fact, be entertained. And I talk about this a lot. Some people think, well, the best public speakers, they're funny, they're charismatic, maybe they're attractive, I remember them. But if you remember a leader for being interesting and knowledgeable and funny and charismatic, but they were trying to make a point to you that will help you be more productive, that is a fail, because you're not looking for that audience to get you more public speaking gigs. You're looking for that team to be part of the process by which the company or the organization advances. So that's what leaders need to think about. What point do I want to make that matches what they want and need to know?
Well, I think to your point, the ones that we remember, even if we were entertained, at least for me, the ones that are memorable are the ones that have led me down, to your point, led me down and they finished their point. The story resolved into a point, a view, something for us to think about, even if we weren't actively having that conversation one-on-one because we're in a keynote hall, let's see, or a presenter. But it made me start that thought process of, well, what do I think about this? Or how could I use that? Or how can I take that away so that even without that speaker knowing it, I am unlocking something. I am engaged. I am inspired to carry on the conversation because it was very clear what their point of view was about the topic. And it was very clear. Now, how they got you down the path could be entertaining, but still.
But that is the vehicle through which your point travels. Even storytelling is not about the story. Ideally, it's the vehicle through which your point travels. And ultimately, you don't want that audience to be interested or to find interest in what you're saying. You want that audience to find relevance in what you're saying. How is this relevant to me? How is this going to support my ability to do my job or unlock professional opportunity for me? These are the things that I'm interested in. I'd love to hear this from my leader.
No, and what this conversation also triggers is being in meetings, being with leaders, being at presentations where it didn't connect. And what you thought was, this speaker doesn't understand me or our audience. I remember at a conference that we hosted, we brought someone in and they were speaking and it sounded great, good ideas. The problem was it wasn't connecting to the audience because his point was not about what this topic could be for the audience. He didn't connect it to them. And so everyone went and said, oh, that was fun. And it went in one ear and out the other.
Yeah, it was like a book report. Yeah.
Right. Or that was a waste of time. I didn't like that because to your point, it isn't connected. They didn't think about what the audience wanted. They came in to say, look how great a speaker I am.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think for the audience, I think this is a great little piece of homework for yourself, is take a piece of paper and just think of 3 or 4 people that you've either been led by or you saw or you were in meetings with, and you said, wow, they connected. I remember. Well, what did they do? Why do you remember them? And on the flip side, then take a list and say, here are people that I didn't really like, or I thought it was a waste of time. Why? What did they do or didn't do? So this way you start building up these skills, or to your point earlier, actions to remind yourself, if I want to connect with my audience, I need to do X, Y, and Z to be prepared.
Yeah, in fact, when someone practices, whether they're a leader or not, and everybody does or should, you don't want to say to the person, give your presentation, how did I do? They're going to be like, you did great. All right, thank you. That's useless, right?
Right.
But here's the question you want to ask, which matches what we were talking about. Give your presentation and say, what point do you think I was trying to get across? Or what takeaway did you receive? Sometimes you can be helpful and say, well, I really wanted people to leave with this one point or this one takeaway. Did that come through?
Right.
The answer to that question is the ballgame. That's everything. What will the audience take away?
And I think this is great. I know we're talking about presentations and people, but everyone communicates.
Absolutely.
Parents are communicating with their children. Children are communicating with their parents. Or you're in school, you're a teacher who's constantly presenting. So I think all of these skills, these relevant skills of what is the point of this conversation? Why am I having this conversation? More importantly, what do I want the audience to get out of it? And I love that question because I agree. I'm guilty of that. When I'll run a presentation or I'll run something by my team to say, okay, here's what we're going to talk about. what do you think? And they'll say, yeah, that sounds great, versus no, this is the point I want people to leave with.
Right.
Is this clear enough?
Right.
Boy, you're going to get a different answer. You're either going to go, oh yeah, that's crystal clear, or, oh, that's what you wanted to talk.
Right. And then you have to go, and then you know exactly what to do. Yeah. And then you're given help. It's not just, I didn't buy it. You know, what can you do with that? But if someone says that point wasn't clear, you need to go back.
Yes.
You know, the point isn't like the end of a movie. You don't want to spoil it. You want to bring it out early. You want to bring it out in the middle. You want to bring it out at the end. No one says after a presentation by you, Glenn, you know, Glenn was terrific, but you know what? He made his point too many times. That's because it's the whole idea. And there are
that was the whole thing they used to tell them what you're going to tell them about.
Right.
Tell
a preview
them, and then tell them what you told them. And and in a way, it is that repetition that locks it in. You may position it from a different side, but what's wonderful about this, and it's just getting even my mind racing a bit, is that clarity of what is the point. Sometimes we try to do too many things. We throw too many things. I was watching a cooking show with my son the other day, and one of the comments from the professional chef to the amateur chef was, edit, edit, edit. You know, you have too many things going on here. More is not always better. Better is better. And to your point is, I'd rather get one point across clearly than try to overwhelm everyone. And they're going, what the hell was that about?
Yeah. Often I'll say, if you share many things, your audience will remember none. If you share some things, they remember some. If you share one thing, they will remember all. So think about when you've received or been the audience and experienced presentations. If you didn't take copious notes, what do you remember? 1, 2, 3 things? And by 3, I mean really 1. So you want to make sure, as the leader, as the presenter, you know what that one thing is that you want them to take away, so you can put enough mustard on it so that they receive it successfully. So,
and to that point, I want everyone to remember what Joel just said here, is that idea of taking copious notes. I've seen it when I presented or I run conferences, and I see it. And I did a podcast episode about that, basically saying, what did you really learn? Because a lot of people get excited and they say, I took 20 pages of notes and I have a notebook full from this conference. The odds are you may remember one thing. Most people are going to put that book down and come back, go back to work and get working, and find it 6 months later and say, or they just lock on to one thing and they want to change things. And so, you know, I've always said, whatever you're doing, great, take your notes, put them away for a day or two, go back and read them. And what's the one, maybe 2 things that stood out, that stand out from you? And it's usually going to come from, to your point, a presenter who was crystal clear on the point. That's why you remember it. That's why it stands out, versus, I don't know, there's 20 pages of notes from this one session. I don't even know what they were talking about.
Right. But I know they started with this joke, and that was pretty good.
Yeah. I like,
which is useless, Yeah.
So let's pivot a little bit. So for you, I love asking my guests about how they got to this point, their journey, because a lot of times when people are listening to people like yourself who are successful, you know, you've written books, and there's people who are sitting here going, I could never do that, or that's not me. So tell me about how you ended up doing this. Was this something that, if you look back at the 10th grade, Joel, or in high school, have you always been someone who communicated well? Is this something that you learned over time or fell into? How did you end up where you are today?
Right. Well, it's proof that it's in fact a skill and not a talent. I started my journey in 6th grade. I was fortunate enough to not have much athletic ability, so I was forced to look at other ways to fill my time. And I was really lucky, frankly, when I was growing up in Texas, there was a speech and debate team at the 6th grade level, and we would go to tournaments and perform some drama, prose, poetry, and things like that, but also speeches, informative speeches or persuasive speeches or impromptu speeches or extemporaneous speeches. So I sort of cut my teeth there at the young age of 6th grade through 8th grade. And I learned more through what I experienced other competitors. And I would watch them because I would want to mimic what they did to have success. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I still do today. What decisions were they making about their communication, about their speech, that made it effective, that made it have impact on me. So I did that all throughout 6th, 7th, 8th grade, middle school, high school, and college. I didn't actually complete that competitive experience. And again, I'm very fortunate. Not all kids can get exposed to, it's called forensics when you get up to the level that's a competitive speech and debate. When I was a senior in college, I learned enough by that point. So I became a national champion in an event called After Dinner Speaking. And I did a number of other events. And there were two big aha moments that happened after that. The first one was I thought I was done at that point, like a basketball career or a chess career. You know, that's it. Now I'm going into the big bad world of business. But what happened was, as I interviewed for jobs, as I communicated with my bosses or eventually went to conferences, I was leveraging everything I learned as a competitive public speaker. And so my aha moment was, not only is this great for me, but I can share this with other people. So I worked with a company in New York City that did coursework for students, and I created my first public speaking course. And that was about 16 or so years ago. And at first I based it on what I learned in competition, but then I began to base it on things I learned by going to conferences. And I'm fortunate that I've always had a day job in business. It wasn't always about communications, but I was always exposed to communicators and when they failed and when they succeeded. So the second aha moment was about 3 years into that, when I would ask my clients and my students, you know, and they did all the things a good public speaker would, that you would get if you Googled public speaking skills. They spoke clearly, they spoke with volume, they did good gestures, they had good eye contact. But when I asked them, well, what's the point of your presentation? That's when they would say, I'm not sure, or my point is history, or my point is entrepreneurship. You know, then they'd give me a theme or a topic. And that's, Glenn, that's when everything changed for me. And I said, there's something basic that people are not starting with. And if they don't know their point, they are rendered pointless. They do not pass go, no matter who you are. So I changed everything, and I wrote Get to the Point in 2017. And I wrote The Language of Leadership last year, really to put this in the context of leadership. But that is foundational. Through all my training, my exercises, my writing for Harvard Business Review and Toastmaster Magazine and all that, if there's one idea I want people to leave with, it's this. Everything starts with a point. You need to identify your point. You need to understand what your strongest proposition is. Maybe it's not getting more traffic to our website, but it's about saving lives or selling more Coca-Cola. Identify that, sharpen it, champion it. And if you're at that level and that level of understanding, then you can succeed in almost any way you envision.
See, I like that. And I love your single point, because I usually ask that at the end, but I love the fact that you jumped in right now. Like, what's the one point you want people to get away, you know, from our conversation? And that's a great point. But let me ask you about that, your journey, because my son's school, it's a smaller school, but they do poetry night. And every student has to write a piece of poetry, and they all have to get up and read it. They have storytelling night. Every student has to get up and speak. And their belief is not that you're going to be a professional speaker, but the idea of working to get over your fear of speaking in front of people, or working towards being able to communicate ideas. I find that's one of the things that's lacking. And if I had to say, what I think is one of the most important skills that students leaving school, be it grammar school and high school, should be, is the ability to share their point of view, be able to communicate, have a conversation, because once they do get into the business world, in whatever role it is, we're always communicating. Is that something that you see a lack of, or more schools are starting to pivot and embrace that and reach out to someone like you to say, could you help build a curriculum?
Yeah, it's interesting. My wife is a longtime private school teacher, and where we connect and overlap is when she has her students writing essays. This is 4th, 5th, 6th grade. She calls it the so what. So you shared everything that happened to you over the summer. So what? How did it change you? How can we, your reader, learn from that experience? How does it influence you moving forward. And these are the things that I think would be most valuable for students, not just getting up there and giving oral reports or poetry, although that's helpful. And that's what Toastmasters does. If you have a Toastmasters group, that's about getting you in front of the audience as much as possible so you overcome a fear. But the big thing is, and what I want students to know is there's a difference between performance and presentation. And I never use that word performance when I talk about giving a presentation, whether it's a leader or a professional or anyone, because performance is all about who you are. And I'm trying to be this other person. And it's about how white my teeth are and what my hair looks today. It's about this. But presentation is not about this. It's not about you. You are the best vehicle and the best voice piece to project that and convey that point. But at the end of the day, it's not about this. It's about this. Your point is over here. You've worked on it maybe with your team. You understand, in media, this is a key point or a message point, a key message. So we call it different things, but decide what it is. And then your only goal is to move it from here to here.
Right.
And that way you are like a bicycle delivery person. You are not telling jokes. You are not a fashion model. You're not performing magic or singing. It's not about you. It's about a very blue collar job. Move this point from here, from my head, to my audience's head. And having that understanding is actually very powerful for students and professionals because it makes them less nervous. What are we nervous about when we think about public speaking or children? It's not really nervous about public speaking. It's nervous about shame. Am I going to embarrass myself, make a fool of myself?
What are they going to think about me? Are they going to like me?
So let's remove it completely from that and say you have a job to do. This is why we say you deliver a speech. You don't perform a speech. So just think of it as, I'd love to get a group of kids together. And I go through different departments of my organization and we run an exercise where everyone says one point. And we use a test I call the I believe that test to make sure it is a point. Mm-hmm. And I think anyone can do that. Just share one point. And if you want to go further, prove that point with a story, with a piece of data, with some history. That's it. And if we can get students doing that, then that serves them in multiple interests, whether they're interviewing for jobs, communicating to people, trying to make points to boyfriends or girlfriends, to mothers-in-law, to the person selling the pizza. I mean, point making is a skill that applies to almost everything.
Yeah, some of the best advice I got from someone, I was an actor for a few years. And, I had a director used to say, I don't care how you feel, it's how the audience feels. Mm-hmm. But once I transitioned to doing, speaking, keynote speaking, things like that, I talked to someone who I admired and I said, what's one piece of advice you would give? And it ties in very well to what you said. He said, the moment you get on stage, it's no longer about you. It's the audience. Why are you there? What's the point you want to get across? What's the thing that you want them to leave with? If you're worried about, are they going to like me? Or how do I look? You're focused on yourself. You're not focused on the audience. You will never deliver that to your point. You'll never deliver your point. You'll never get your message across because you're so focused here. And that's where that fear comes in. And that just tied in perfectly to, the years of acting, but that clarity of having one or two points you want the audience to leave with. And then to what you were saying before is then you can decide the vehicle to share the point. Maybe the vehicle is a story. Maybe the vehicle is a joke. Maybe the vehicle is a chart up on the wall with data points that support your point or conflict against your point. But you have that fact, that clear piece of a sentence or a thought or an opinion that we're going to plant our flag on for the next 15, 20 minutes or however long. And we're going to all look at it. And now we're going to discuss it. And I like that. I also love deliver. That's something we always hear. But once you slowed it down and you said, no, you're delivering the message, it's like, whoa, that is so true. You're not, but no one says come perform your presentation.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So in your, because you write a lot, as I said, mm-hmm. and you see all of these, different ways of people learning. One of the things that I'm always fascinated with is how do you, as an author, you have your book. How do you translate that then and take pieces and then look at, again, to say, we're going to create this into a video series, or how I'm going to unlock this for a presentation? Walk me through a little of your process, because again, we've talked about it in some specifics, but if you were going to create a presentation or a video series or something about get to the point, or make sure you have your point, or lead the language of leadership, what's your process?
So I do, the book is really a manual for my workshop. And I do workshops for a lot of organizations in my extracurricular time. And it's really taking the ideas in the book and turning them into exercises that are customized for their mission. Now, I've also been approached by businesses, and the businesses create curriculum for professionals. And so I stand in front of a camera and I break it out into pieces. What enables me to do that is knowing the big idea in advance. So I only do 3 basic workshops. I do a workshop on knowing your point. I do a workshop on elevating your email, so your points come through email. And I do a workshop on understanding how to leverage the platform of Zoom and video conferencing to make sure your point goes through that way.
Right.
So wherever my journey takes me in terms of sharing that, whether it's a podcast or an interview, or I'm writing for Harvard Business Review or Fast Company or CNBC, I understand, no matter what way that communication takes place, a video, an essay, a manual, what my goal is. My goal is to convince someone of this point and to prove it through examples, through links, through data. And then it's all sort of formatted for me, regardless of the platform or the format. I know what I need to do, and I know how to prepare myself. Now, one thing I should note to you, and I try to insert into these conversations, is that in a presentation, whether you're a leader or not, 99.99% of the time, you do not want a word for word script with you as your support vehicle, because then you are reading, and reading comes with perils, and reading is another part of your brain that's different from your presenting part. The audience wants this explained to them. They don't want things read to them. So bring notes with you. And the best notes, I like to say, are like the list you bring to the supermarket. In the list you bring to the supermarket, number 3 doesn't say, go into the vegetable aisle, pick up a tomato, search it for spots, put it in a bag, put it in your cart, period. It just says tomatoes.
Right.
And in the same way, your note should support you. I see tomatoes. I know what I wanted to say there. I'm just reminded that I wanted to make that. Or here's a note here of a date or a percentage. So I remember to say that. It's only there to remind you of the things you might otherwise forget. But what that does, having very limited notes, but that prompt you and doesn't script you, is enables you to do this.
Right.
Here's what I want you to understand. Here's the one thing I want you to take away.
No, and see, that is very helpful. And that's why I wanted to ask you that question. Is I find that many speakers think that, and I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier about, it's this magical gift. The best speakers rehearse, they practice, they have a roadmap. They know what they're going to say because they know what the point is. So now they know what stories they're going to, or what data they're going to support. The key is having that bullet point list of just reminding you of the flow, or reminding you where, okay, once we finish this, we're going to move into this section. But you have to map that out. Although it looks effortless, and that's why it can be intimidating, it's because they have a framework underneath. I use the example of driving a car. When we all first learned to drive a car, we had our hands on 10 and 2, checking all the mirrors, following the speed limit. We were, don't talk to me, I'm driving. To now, you're driving with your knee and you're talking and you're doing a bazillion things in the car because, one, you've done it so many times, it feels natural to you and you're comfortable in it. And I think that's something to support what you're talking about. They're skills that you can practice and practice and practice with the right framework. You will get better at it. You will get more comfortable with it. And then you find that structure you've built where you can be more free inside the structure.
Yeah. And I like to break it down. I always say my job is actually to make this easier for you, because I fear that you're making it hard on yourself by writing a full script, by thinking I have to cover every single detail, convey a virtual Wikipedia page on this subject to you.
Right.
And actually, it's much more simple, because your audience will only take away one or two things. So that's why I try to limit people's notes, and I talk to them about their PowerPoint. But ultimately, it's about, not only less is more, but more is less. You benefit from streamlining and understanding your specific point and what you want to do that day.
Yeah, if they wanted to read, they just go read the book. And that is, to your point, is we've all seen them, PowerPoint slides, and they just stand up and they read the text. And now you're going, well, why are you on the stage? I could read, just give me the slides.
Yeah. Versus
someone who has one word or a statement. And now you're going, great. I can't wait to see where we're going with this. Okay, speaker, take me on the journey. Let's go. And I think, I love everything you've said, because it is very simple. It's not easy, but it's
right. Well,
simple.
You have to know what to do. It's not about, when we say less is more and more is less, that's not just about cutting words. That's about really digging deep. And it gets to this idea of, is at the end of the day, your highest value proposition, is it really getting more traffic to our website? Is it really opening up more franchises around the country? Or is it about saving the world? Is it about selling more Coca-Cola? Is it about moving the entire organization to the next level of prominence or respect? Always think to yourself, what's the big goal that I really want people to understand? And then how can I create a communication that leads to it? And Glenn, I love to give people sort of tactical approaches. So I want to leave you and them with an equation that good points often fall into. And it's this: if we do X, Y will result. If we do X, Y will result. Now, X is the mechanism, and that's always going to be fairly clear, but it needs to be specific. Not if we do the right thing, but what is something specific? What is that mechanism? Y is the result, and make sure the result is the ultimate result that you're trying to reach, not a short-term result. But if you figure out that X and Y, most of the lion's work of your effort is done, because then it's just about proving that X will lead to Y.
Yes, I love that. And that's a perfect place to wrap up. I really love this conversation, because I think communication is so important. I think and I'll speak for myself personally, I write and then I edit, and then I have the fear of I didn't do enough. Versus someone said to me as well, if you're just filling a word count, you'll fill up the word count, but did you make your point? Right. Versus maybe this is really 2 points. So that means it's 2 articles, and that's okay as well. And once I started to understand that and really say, going back to your book, this is the point. Right. All of a sudden, like you said, the avenues opened up, the examples opened up, because I was very clear on what I wanted somebody to feel or understand when they were done reading this or watching this or walking out from a workshop. That, I think, for all of you listening, you're all in charge of something at some point in your life. It can be your family. It could be, your team. Always ask yourself, why am I having this conversation? What's the point? And make sure it's very clear, so that everyone understands it. If not, as you were saying, Joel, you're up a level, you're in a category, you're in a theme, you're in a generality. If everyone's looking at you going, what? You're not crystal clear enough. So that's phenomenal. So at the end of every episode, we wind up, I like to just ask some random questions about you, so that one, they get to know you, but more importantly, just a few things that have inspired you. Then we'll get let you share where they can connect with you, and then we'll wind down. So first question I always ask is, what was a piece of advice that you got from someone that really connected to move you personally to, through something you were struggling with or something to help clarify your journey or your point? What was it?
Well, a really good piece of advice I got early on, it's sort of separate from communication, but linked to it, is when you were interviewing for a job, to pay very close attention to, and in fact, at the top of the list is who you're going to be reporting to. Because at the end of the day, and I think data supports, people leave their job most often, not necessarily because of the salary or because some of their options, but because they have a problem with someone they're reporting to or work with. So the opportunity to recognize this, and I got this advice from someone I reported to, and I went, after I left that organization, I went to him later when I had to choose between two opportunities. And that's when he said, look to the person you're going to be reporting to, and they're probably interviewing you, and to the people you'll be working with. And that's what's going to determine your fulfillment as you move forward in that position.
That's great. I like that. Next question. Is there a place now that, where travel is loosening up, is there a place that you have not been to or visited that you would love to go visit?
I would love to be honest, the place I'd most like to visit is Japan. I've not been exposed to that much to another culture and a different language that was very foreign to me, but very successful in certain ways. And, their leading is about learning and experiencing as much as it is about doing. So I think I would benefit from being exposed to different cultures, different languages, different approaches, and I would learn more about what they do in their business world as well. And I'm sort of fascinated by that part of the world. So I think going to Japan is high up on my list.
That's a great one. Yeah, that's on my list as well. Okay, two more questions. One is there a book that you've read or something, a podcast you're listening to or something you're watching that has inspired you or really is fascinating you right now that you would recommend to the audience? I always try to get resources that my guests are really moving them.
Yeah, sure. I think I have it here. Yeah. So my friend April Rinn wrote this book, which is called Flux, 8 Superpowers for Thriving in Constant Change. And her big point is, as we experience change and challenge, whether it's the pandemic or anything else, instead of being fearful of it and how we react to it, maybe there's a way you can leverage it and succeed based on how you approach it and find advantage within it. And that concept is pretty big, especially nowadays, more than ever. With so many challenges to our work and our lives even. So that really inspired me, and I'm happy to be friends with her and support that book. It's called Flux, and her name is April Rinn.
Great. We'll put that into the show notes as well. So you sort of answered it earlier, and I always end this with this question, but it definitely bears repeating. We've spoken for a bit, touched on a lot of different aspects of communication and presentation and skills. But I'd like you to repeat the one thing that you hope the audience takes away from this. What would that be?
It would be, and it bears repeating. So I don't mind repeating it. Like we said, nobody ever comes from a presentation and says, well, Joel made this point, valuable point too many times. So I'm going to reinforce it. And that is the importance of having a point. Whether you're talking to your team or to your aunt, you want to make sure your communication has impact. It will only have impact if you know your point, if you're sharpening your point, and if you're championing, and I love to use that word, championing your point. Be the person on whom the conveyance of that point rests, not your audience. That means make it clear, be strong, and champion it. And you'll find that with that basic idea, having a point and selling a point, you are well on your way to having that kind of impact. Without doing those things, you are really subtracting and hindering yourself in that process.
That's great. I love that. And I agree. It bears repeating over and over again because to me, having this conversation, that was really one of the most helpful things, just to reinforce and re-clarify, because I think many of us can drift away from it, and we use a slightly dull, I always use pencils, slightly dull pencil. And I love the thing about, sharpen it, make sure it's really sharp, and champion it. So thank you again. This has been really a lot of fun. So how can the audience connect with you? Where do they find you on social media, your website? What's the best? And we'll link everything in the show notes, but I like people to hear it from you as well.
I appreciate that, Glenn. And this was a lot of fun, and I hope you benefit from it and your audience benefits from it. The best way to reach me or to receive a lot of the ideas freely is to go to my website, which is www.joelschwartzberg.net. It's JoelSchwartzberg.net. That's where I put all of the articles that I've written. All of the podcasts have been part of, information about the books. But the IT people, like when I say this, I like to consider my work open code. That is, I want people to interact with it and take advantage of it. So that's place one. Place two is really Twitter. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, but I really enjoy Twitter. And there I am, the Joel Truth, TheJoelTruth, a lot easier than my last name. And on that, I'm literally just throwing out visually idea after idea after idea after idea, because this is not a competition. If I'm a good communicator, that doesn't mean you have to be a bad communicator. We can all be great communicators. There's plenty of room in this place. So I want everyone to have the ability and the mindset and the tactics to really champion those points. So I do it in as many ways as I can.
Great. Well, please connect with Joel. I connected with him on Twitter, and I'm looking forward to seeing everything that's coming out. So again, thank you so much, Joel. I do appreciate it. So audience, you know the drill here. Please make sure that you subscribe to the podcast on Apple, or if you're an Android user over on Spotify, you can jump over to the YouTube channel, see the conversation as well. And I really do appreciate it. Please make sure if you found value, I'm sure there's someone in your network that could benefit from what Joel was saying. So please share it out to them. We're relying on the audience to help grow the reach of this podcast, to help as many people. That's the reason we started it. That's why we say you're in charge. We're trying to help you when you have that doubt of, now what do I do? Well, these guests, these resources are here to help you. So please make sure you share it out. I really do appreciate your attention. I know there's a lot of places that you can consume content, but the fact that you spent time with Joel and myself today means the world. And as I do say at the end of every show, you're in charge, but now Joel has given you some tips and strategies to help you become better, both personally and professionally. Thanks again. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thanks again, Joel. Pleasure spending time with you today.
Thank you, Glenn.